For 2 decades, the image of the Australian soldier was defined by the Middle East. It was the crushing dust of Uruzgan province, the searing heat of Taji, and the endless, grinding patrols and Bushmaster armored vehicles across arid deserts. The Australian Army became arguably the best counterinsurgency force in the world. They built an entire institutional culture around kicking down doors in mud brick villages, surviving IED strikes on lonely roads, and fighting a shadow war against an elusive insurgent enemy. But if you look at a map of the Indo-Pacific today, you realize a terrifying strategic truth. The desert is irrelevant. The mountains of Afghanistan offer no lessons for the war that is coming. The next war, the high-intensity industrial-scale conflict that keeps strategists in Canberra and Washington awake at night, will not be fought on dry land. It will be fought in the water. It will be fought in the green water of the littorals and the brown water of the mangrove swamps. It will be a war of missiles, sensors, and speed fought across the vast, suffocating humidity of the archipelagos. China is currently building the largest navy in the world by hull count. They are launching the equivalent tonnage of the entire Royal Australian Navy every 18 months. They are churning out Type 055 cruisers and Type 052D destroyers like sausages. If Australia tries to fight a conventional, symmetrical, ship-to-ship war against the People's Liberation Army Navy plan, in the open ocean, the math is simple. Australia loses. You cannot win a tonnage war against the industrial workshop of the world. You cannot outbuild a superpower. So, Australia isn't going to fight that war. Instead, Canberra has decided to change the map. They are pivoting to a strategy that turns the thousands of islands to their north, from the Indonesian archipelago through Papua New Guinea to the Solomons, into a weapon. They are building a force designed to seize these islands, arm them with long-range anti-ship missiles, and turn the sea lanes into a kill box that no Chinese destroyer can survive. This is the death of the Desert Army. This is the birth of the Australian Marine Force. Welcome to Doctrine of War. Today we are dissecting the most significant doctrinal shift in Australian military history since the Second World War. The thesis for today is brutal but necessary. Australia is realizing that it cannot dominate the ocean with ships alone. The ocean is too big, and the Royal Australian Navy, even with future nuclear submarines, is too small to cover every gap. Instead, Australia is adopting the Archipelagic Strategy, a method of fighting that uses geography to equalize the odds against a numerically superior foe. We are going to break down the land bridge that forms Australia's northern shield. We will look at the new sovereign-built fleet of stealthy landing craft designed to move troops under the radar of enemy satellites. And we will analyze the God of War, the precision missile systems that allow a few soldiers on a muddy beach to sink a multi-billion-dollar cruiser 500 kilometers away. To understand this strategy, you have to ignore the political borders drawn on a map and look at the physical geography of the region north of Darwin. Strategists call it the maritime continent, or the land bridge. It is a chaotic, dense, and complex chain of roughly 17,000 islands stretching from Sumatra in the west, through Java, up through the Philippines, and across to Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands in the east. In the open Pacific, a Chinese carrier strike group has room to maneuver. They can use their speed, their massive radar horizons, and their defensive screens to dictate the battle. But if Beijing wants to project power south towards the Australian mainland, or east towards the critical supply lines that connect the US to Australia, they have to pass through this land bridge. They have to navigate a series of narrow, predictable choke points: the Lombok Strait, the Sunda Strait, the Makassar Strait, and the Wetar Strait. This geography is a nightmare for a large, blue water navy. Shallow waters make sonar unreliable. Thousands of islands create radar clutter, hiding small boats and low-flying missiles. But what is a nightmare for an invader is a paradise for a defender. The Archipelagic Strategy is based on the concept of sea denial. It is crucial to understand the difference between sea control and sea denial. Sea control is when you own the water. You can sail your merchant ships and your warships anywhere you want, and the enemy cannot stop you. That is the US Navy's traditional goal. Sea denial is different. Sea denial is when you prevent the enemy from sailing there, even if you don't own the water yourself. It is the strategy of the minefield, the submarine, and the coastal missile battery. Australia doesn't need to rule the waves north of Darwin. It just needs to make sure China can't rule them either. Australia's plan is to deploy agile, highly mobile army battle groups onto these islands. These aren't invasion forces meant to conquer territory or occupy cities. They are stand-in forces. Their job is to land on a rock, set up their passive sensors, deploy their missile batteries, and create a 500-kilometer bubble of denial around them. Think of it like this. If you place a battery of naval strike missiles or PRSMs on an island overlooking the Lombok Strait, you effectively close that strait to enemy shipping. You don't need a destroyer sitting in the water to do it. The island is the destroyer. And unlike a ship, an island cannot be sunk. You can bomb it, you can burn it, but the island will still be there tomorrow. This turns the terrain north of Australia into a porcupine. A Chinese task force trying to push south wouldn't be fighting a single decisive naval battle. They would be running a gauntlet. They would be sailing through a corridor of hundreds of overlapping kill zones, populated by missile batteries hidden in the jungle, constantly moving, constantly tracking. It creates a level of friction that slows the enemy advance to a crawl and bleeds their fleet white before they ever see the Australian coast. The doctrinal term for this in the Defense Strategic Review is impact projection. It represents a fundamental shift in the Army's mindset from protecting the land to projecting power from the land. In the past, the Australian Army's job was strictly territorial defense. They would wait on the beaches of Queensland or the vast expanse of Western Australia for the enemy to arrive. The Archipelagic Strategy argues that this is suicide. If the enemy is landing on Australian beaches, the war is already lost. The sea lanes have been cut, the blockade is in place, and the economy is strangling. Impact projection moves the defensive line forward, thousands of kilometers forward. By placing long-range fire systems on the islands to the north, the Australian Army can influence events at sea. They can sink ships, shoot down aircraft, and disrupt supply lines from the safety of the jungle canopy. This integrates the Army into the naval fight. It creates a multi-domain threat. A Chinese admiral might be confident he can detect and sink an Australian frigate. He knows its radar signature, its top speed, and its likely tactics. But can he detect a camouflage-netted truck hidden under triple canopy rainforest on a remote island in the Banda Sea? Can he differentiate a HIMARS launcher from a logging truck on a thermal camera? Probably not. And even if he does, firing a multimillion-dollar hypersonic cruise missile to destroy a relatively cheap truck is a bad economic exchange for China. This strategy plays to Australia's historical strengths: highly trained, autonomous small teams who are comfortable operating in rough terrain for weeks at a time. Australian soldiers are renowned for their jungle warfare capabilities, skills honed in the green hell of Vietnam, the jungles of Malaya, and the mountains of East Timor. The Archipelagic Strategy takes that heritage and gives it a 21st century technological edge. It turns the infantryman from a door kicker into a sensor node and a ship killer. The grunt is no longer just holding ground. He is controlling the sea. Mid-roll call to action. If you're starting to see why a few soldiers with missiles on a remote island might be more dangerous than a billion-dollar warship, and why geography is the ultimate force multiplier, hit that like button and subscribe to Doctrine of War. We're breaking down the strategies that turn the map into a weapon, and your support keeps this analysis coming. The new fleet. But a strategy is just ink on paper without the logistics to execute it. You can have the best missiles in the world, but if you can't get them to the fight, they are useless. How do you get these missile teams, their trucks, their fuel, and their heavy pods of ammo onto these islands? And more importantly, how do you move them before the enemy finds them? You can't use massive amphibious assault ships like the HMS Canberra or HMS Adelaide for everything. These 27,000-ton behemoths are invaluable command centers, but they are too big, too valuable, and too easy to target. In a missile war, they are fat targets. If you park a landing helicopter dock, LHD, off the coast of an island, every satellite in orbit sees it. You need something smaller, something faster, something stealthier, something there are a lot of. This is where the Littoral Maneuver Vessel Medium, LMV-M, comes in. This represents the new workhorse of the Australian Army's maritime ambition. And the pride of this program is that it is being built right here in Australia by Australian hands, ensuring sovereign capability. The contract has been awarded to Austal, the maritime giant based in Henderson, Western Australia. Austal is famous globally for building the Independence-class littoral combat ships and the Expeditionary Fast Transport (EPF) for the U.S. Navy. They know how to build fast, aluminum-hulled shallow-water combatants. The Army is acquiring 18 of these heavy landing craft. But don't let the term landing craft fool you. These aren't the slow, clumsy Higgins boats of World War II that drop a ramp and get stuck in the sand. The LMV-M is a 50-meter-long, specialized logistics predator. It is designed with a shallow draft specifically to enter tiny inlets, river mouths, and unprepared beaches that large ships can't touch. This opens up thousands of potential landing sites across the archipelago, making enemy prediction impossible. It has the range, over 2,000 nautical miles, to deploy from Darwin or Cairns into the archipelagos and stay there for weeks, independent of a mothership. Crucially, it is designed to carry heavy armor. It can carry the new Redback infantry fighting vehicle, the M1A2 Abrams tank, or, most importantly for this strategy, the HIMARS missile launcher. It can beach, offload a fully loaded HIMARS battery and retract in minutes. This creates distributed lethality. Instead of having all your eggs in one basket, one big ship carrying an entire battalion, you spread your force across 18 agile vessels. If the enemy sinks one LMV-M, you lose one launcher and a dozen crew. It is a tragedy, but you don't lose the war. The other 17 are still operational. This resilience is the core of the new Australian way of war. It creates a targeting dilemma for the enemy. Do they waste a precious, scarce DF-21 ballistic missile to kill a small, cheap landing craft? The tactical application of the LMV-M fleet enables a concept called shoot and scoot, or dispersion and concentration. This is the rhythm of the modern battlefield. Imagine a typical operation in 2028. An LMV-M approaches a remote, uninhabited island in the Arafura Sea under the cover of darkness. It runs silent, its low profile blending into the radar clutter of the waves. It beaches quickly using its specialized bow ramp. A HIMARS truck rolls off, drives 500 meters into the tree line, and sets up a firing position. The LMV-M withdraws to a hidden cove nearby, camouflaged against the mangroves. The HIMARS unit receives targeting data via a secure, burst transmission data link. The data comes from an overhead F-35 Lightning II, or a Triton drone, or even a U.S. submarine. The target is a Chinese destroyer 400 kilometers away, transiting a strait. The crew enters the firing solution. The launcher elevates. In a flash of fire and smoke, it fires 2 precision strike missiles, PRSM. The moment the missiles leave the rails, the unit is compromised. The enemy's counter-battery radar and space-based infrared sensors will track the launch point. A counter-battery strike, likely a swarm of loitering munitions or a supersonic cruise missile, will be inbound within minutes. But the HIMARS doesn't stay there. It immediately packs up, a process that takes less than 5 minutes, and drives back to the extraction point. The waiting LMV-M beaches, loads the truck, reverses off the sand, and disappears into the complex clutter of the archipelago coastline. By the time the Chinese cruise missile hits the launch site, there is nothing there but burnt vegetation and tire tracks. This creates a deadly shell game in the islands. The enemy knows the missiles are there. They know the threat is real. But they never know exactly where they will pop up next. They are forced to scan thousands of islands, searching for a needle in a haystack, while the needle is hunting them. This mobility is life. In modern warfare, if you stop moving, you die. The LMV-M provides the organic mobility that allows the army to treat the ocean like a highway. It allows them to island hop, not to conquer territory, but to evade destruction and maintain a constant threat. It also solves the resupply nightmare. A missile battery burns through ammo fast. A HIMARS pod only holds a few missiles. You can't rely on helicopters for everything. Chinooks are loud, vulnerable, and can't carry the weight of multiple rocket pods over long distances. The LMV-M acts as a floating magazine, keeping the batteries fed with the heavy ordnance they need to sustain the fight for weeks. This fleet represents a return to Australia's maritime roots. It acknowledges that as an island nation, the Army cannot just be a passenger on Navy ships. The Army must be a maritime power in its own right, able to drive itself to work and fight from the sea. The god of war. We've talked about the geography and the boat. Now let's talk about the tip of the spear. The weapon that makes the enemy afraid to enter the bubble. The centerpiece of the Archipelagic Strategy is the M142 High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, or HIMARS. The Australian public has seen these trucks on the news in Ukraine, devastating Russian logistics. But the truck itself isn't the story. The story is what the truck fires. Australia is investing heavily in the PRSM, the Precision Strike Missile. This is the next-generation surface-to-surface missile developed by Lockheed Martin, and Australia is a Tier 1 partner in its development. The specs on this weapon are terrifying for a naval commander. The official range is stated as 499 plus kilometers, a number chosen to comply with old treaties, the INF Treaty, that no longer exist. In reality, later increments of this missile, increment 2 and beyond, will likely reach out to 600, 700, or even 1,000 kilometers with the integration of ramjet technology. That is the distance from Darwin to the edge of Indonesian waters. Or from a forward base in the Philippines to the center of the South China Sea. But range isn't the only factor. The PRSM is equipped with a multi-mode seeker, combining radar and infrared imaging. It can track moving targets. This is the game changer. Historically, ballistic missiles were only good for hitting static targets like bunkers, bridges, or airfields. The PRSM can hunt ships. When you combine a PRSM with a HIMARS launcher, you turn a standard army truck into a ship killer. Think about the economics of this exchange. A Chinese Type 055 high-class cruiser costs billions of dollars. It takes 5 years to build. It has a crew of hundreds of highly trained sailors. A HIMARS truck costs a few $1,000,000. A PRSM costs significantly less. If an Australian Army unit fires 2 PRSMs and sinks a Type 055, that is an asymmetric victory of historic proportions. It is a cost-exchange ratio that favors the defender heavily. The attacker has to risk their most expensive assets, capital ships, to project power, while the defender only risks cheap, replaceable assets, trucks and missiles. Australia is not just buying a few of these. The government has announced a massive expansion of its long-range fires capability. They are aiming to double the number of HIMARS launchers, fielding multiple regiments. They are setting up domestic manufacturing for the missiles through the GWEO, Guided Weapons and Explosive Ordnance, enterprise to ensure sovereign magazine depth. This means Australia won't run out of missiles after the first week of war. They will be building them at home. This capability transforms the army from a force that captures ground into a force that denies space. It allows the army to reach out and touch the enemy long before the enemy can see the Australian coast. This strategy also leverages the concept of asymmetric advantage. Australia knows it cannot match China hull for hull. Attempting to build a navy capable of defeating the plan in a symmetrical fight is a bankrupting endeavor. China's shipbuilding capacity is simply too great. But missiles are cheap relative to ships. By investing in the god of war, long-range artillery, Australia bypasses the need for naval parity. Consider the detection problem. A frigate in the open ocean stands out against the cold, flat background of the sea. It is a massive radar reflector. It generates a huge thermal plume from its engines. It is easy for satellites and long-range drones to find. An island, by contrast, is full of noise. It has radar clutter from hills and trees. It has thermal noise from the sun heating the jungle. Finding a green truck parked under a green tree in a jungle full of green trees is one of the hardest tasks in reconnaissance. The Australian force can hide in the noise, while the enemy force is exposed in the open. Furthermore, the PRSM is difficult to intercept. It flies at hypersonic speeds, Mach 5+. It maneuvers in the terminal phase, performing doglegs, to confuse enemy radar. Most ship-based air defense systems are designed to stop sea-skimming cruise missiles or aircraft. Stopping a high-angle ballistic missile coming down from the stratosphere at hypersonic velocity is a much harder physics problem. It requires specialized interceptors that are expensive and limited in number. This forces the enemy fleet to stay back. If they know there is a 500-kilometer no-go zone around every Australian-held island, they are forced to operate further away. This reduces the range of their own aircraft and missiles. It buys time and space for the rest of the ADF and its allies to operate. It effectively shrinks the ocean available to the adversary. It channels them into predictable routes where Australian submarines, the Collins class now, the AUKUS SSNs later, can lie in wait. It is a strategy of layered defense, where the land-based missiles act as the outer shield, funneling the enemy into the jaws of the underwater trap. The conclusion. The Archipelagic Strategy is Australia's answer to the defining challenge of our time. It is a recognition that the old way of war, expeditionary counterinsurgency and relying on Big Brother America to handle the sea, is dead. The new way of war is high-tech, high-intensity and maritime-focused. By turning the army into a marine-like force, Australia is building a Pacific porcupine. A porcupine doesn't hunt, it goes about its business. It doesn't seek to invade the lion's den. But if a predator tries to bite it, the predator gets a mouthful of quills. The islands to the north are the quills. The HIMARS launchers are the sharp tips. The LMV-M vessels are the muscles that move the quills to where they are needed most. This strategy aligns perfectly with the United States Marine Corps' Force Design 2030. The U.S. Marines are doing the exact same thing, ditching their tanks, lightening their load, and focusing on island hopping with anti-ship missiles, MESIS. But for Australia, this isn't just an expeditionary concept. This is home defense. These are the approaches to the Australian mainland. Australia is taking ownership of its immediate neighborhood. It is saying to the world, we might not be the biggest power in the Pacific, but we control the terrain that matters. It is a shift from forward defense, fighting in other people's wars far away, to national defense, fighting for the approaches to the homeland. China wants to break out into the Pacific. They want to push past the first island chain and project power globally. To do that, they need secure sea lanes to the south. They need to break the containment. Australia's new strategy slams that door shut. It turns the land bridge into a fortress. Not a fortress of concrete and bunkers, which can be bypassed or smashed with bunker busters, but a fortress of mobile, lethal fires that can appear on any island at any time. It is a strategy of intelligence, agility, and firepower. It requires a soldier who is as comfortable reading a naval chart as they are reading a topographic map. It requires a commander who understands the kill chain of a missile as well as the logistics of a beach landing. It requires a mindset shift from holding ground to controlling sea. The desert army is gone. The jungle army is back. And this time they aren't just bringing rifles, they are bringing ship-killing missiles with them. Australia is proving that you don't need a massive navy to be a maritime power. You just need to understand geography, and you need the will to turn that geography into a weapon. The map is the ultimate ally, and for the first time in decades, Australia is learning how to use it. Thanks for watching Doctrine of War. Do you think the Archipelagic Strategy is the right move for Australia, or should they have focused on building more warships? Is the pivot to missiles and small boats enough to deter a superpower? Let us know in the comments below. Stay sharp, stay realistic, and we'll see you in the next one.